I've got a root in my hand right now that doesn't look like much. Dark, shrunken, about the size of a walnut, tough hide like a dried plum, wrinkled tight around itself. A little grit still worked into the creases from wherever it got dug. This one came out of the ground, dug from a wet mountain meadow, up near the tree line, the kind of open ground you find scattered between stands of ponderosa pine and lodgepole. Hold it up against the light, and it's almost black, purple-brown at the edges. Nothing like the pale roots you'd pull out of a garden bed. Smells sweet if you get your nose right up on it, almost like molasses left too long on a stove. Heavier than you'd expect for something this small, dense, like it's holding more than its size lets on, sitting there in my palm against the dirt still caked on my fingers, a low fire going out of focus behind it. Doesn't look like much of anything, but this root pulled a starving expedition back from the edge of dying in the bitter roots, and it's the same root that turned around and nearly finished the job. Before I go any further, here are 3 things that are going to happen in this video. First, you're going to learn how to dig this root and how to cook it the way it has to be cooked, so that if you ever need it, it feeds you instead of hurting you. Second, I'm going to tell you why most of what gets taught about this root online today skips the one part that actually matters, and there's a reason for that, and it isn't an accident. Third, there's a documented mistake tied to this root, a real one, made by real men who should have known better, and it's still being made today by people who think they know what they're doing. Stay with me to the end, and you'll have it. Here's the paradox, and I want you to just hold on to it for now. The very thing that made this root a lifesaver is the same thing that made it dangerous. Not a different flaw, not bad luck. The exact same property, working 2 different ways depending on how patient the man handling it was willing to be. Keep that in the back of your mind. We'll circle back. Late summer, 1805, a party of explorers comes down out of the Bitterroot Mountains half-starved, having eaten candles and portable soup and at least one of their own colts to survive the crossing. 11 days in those mountains, freezing rain turning to snow, game so scarce some days they saw none at all. Men so gaunt their clothes hang off them, moving slower each day, arguing less because arguing takes energy nobody had left to spend. They stumble down out of the timber onto a prairie thick with blue flowers, and beneath that prairie, buried in the black soil, is this root, camas, and it grows there by the ton. Acres of it, more food than the whole party could dig in a week. To men who hadn't eaten a real meal in weeks, it must have looked like salvation laid out flat across the ground. And in a way, it was. Trappers who came after them leaned on this root the same way. Year after year, whenever meat ran thin, whole tribes built their yearly calendar around when this root came ripe, moved their camps to be near it, guarded good camas ground the way another people might guard a wheat field. This wasn't a curiosity somebody dug up to try once. This was survival food, plain and simple, the kind that kept people alive through the lean stretch between one hunt and the next, the kind a family's whole winter could depend on if the digging that summer went well or went poorly. Now here's the villain, and it isn't a conspiracy, it's just quiet arithmetic. Camas has had a resurgence the last few years. Foraging content, homestead pages, survival influencers, all of them love this root because it photographs well against a blue prairie and it's got a good story attached to it already, one people recognize. But the real way to make camas safe to eat takes a full day, sometimes 3, in a low earthen pit, with heat working on it the whole time, and nobody wants to sit on a hillside for 3 days, waiting on a video to finish filming itself. So what gets taught instead is a shortcut. Toss it over a bed of coals for 20 minutes, call it roasted, cut to the next clip. That shortcut isn't malicious. Nobody's trying to hurt you. It's just what gets clicked, what fits inside a 10-minute upload, what keeps the channel's numbers moving in the right direction. But it strips out the one step that actually matters, the slow part, the part that can't be sped up, no matter how good the editing is. And if you're relying on what you saw in a 10-minute video, you're very likely already planning to do this wrong, through no fault of your own, just because the format that taught you was built to move fast, not to get it right. The first layer is finding it and knowing when to dig. You want it while it's flowering or just after blue flower, 6 petals, because once that bloom is gone, the plant looks like nothing but grass and a bulb in the dirt, and there's a root that grows right alongside it, white flowered instead of blue, that any experienced forager will tell you gets its own separate warning entirely. That's a different conversation for a different day. Today we're only talking about the good one, and even the good one isn't as simple as pulling a carrot. The second layer is what's actually inside that bulb, and it's the layer nobody talks about. Camas is loaded with a carbohydrate called inulin. Raw, that carbohydrate sits in your gut like a brick. A man's body cannot break it down on its own. Not well, not fast. You eat it raw or barely cooked, and you're not getting fed, you're getting bloated, cramped, and doubled over at the exact moment you can least afford to be. The third layer is the fix, and it's the part that separates the men who knew what they were doing from the men who just got lucky. You dig a pit, you line it with hot stones, you layer the bulbs in wet grass and bark, you cover it, and you let heat work on it slow for a full day at minimum, sometimes 2 or 3. That slow heat does something the quick fire never will. It breaks that stubborn carbohydrate down into simple sugar, turns a root that fights your stomach into a root that tastes like baked pear, dark and sweet and soft enough to mash with your thumb. Same root, same bulb, completely different food, and the only difference is time. The fourth layer is knowing when to stop waiting, because a man can undercook this just as easy as he can rush it, and there's a real test for it, not a guess. Pull one bulb, split it open, raw camas is pale, almost white, and it smells like nothing at all. Maybe a little like raw potato if you push it. Done camas is dark all the way through, brown, sometimes near black, and it smells sweet before you even get it to your mouth. That same molasses smell I mentioned back at the start. If the center's still pale, it goes back in the pit. No shortcuts on that test. The color tells you the truth, even when your empty stomach is telling you something else. Quick question for you before I keep going. How many hours do you think it actually takes before a pit of camas stops being a starchy brick and starts being something sweet enough to eat like candy? Drop your guess in the comments. I'll tell you who gets closest. And I promise most of you are going to guess low. Here's where it turns dangerous, and here's the mistake. The one I promised you at the top. When that expedition hit the Camas Prairie, they didn't have 3 days to wait. They were starving. They'd been starving for weeks, and food was sitting right in front of them, more of it than they'd seen in a month. So they ate it fast, half-cooked in some cases, in enormous quantities, on stomachs that hadn't held a real meal in longer than any man should have to go without one. Washed down with fish they traded for from the local people, another rich food their bodies had forgotten how to handle, and it wrecked them. Nearly the whole party came down sick within days. Cramping doubled them over, weakness that kept grown men flat on their backs, some barely able to stand or walk at the exact moment they needed strength most, still deep in hostile, unfamiliar country, with a long way left to travel before winter closed the passes behind them. This wasn't bad luck. It was the inulin doing exactly what inulin does to an underprepared gut, a chemical fact playing out in real bodies. And it's the same mistake people make right now today, following a 6-minute video that told them a quick roast was good enough. So here's the whole answer laid out plain, the paradox, from the top of this video. The thing that saved that expedition and the thing that nearly crippled it were never two different properties of this root. It was one property, the same stubborn carbohydrate, and the only variable that decided which way it cut was patience. Handled with time, it's the sweetest, most reliable calories a man could dig out of the ground. Handled in a hurry, on an empty stomach, in bulk, it's the reason a party of starving men spent days too sick to travel. Same root, same bulb. The difference was never the plant. The difference was the man standing over the pit, and whether he was willing to wait. This isn't campfire legend either. It's written down. The expedition kept journals through this whole stretch, day by day, and the sickness that hit the party after they gorged on camas at Waipe Prairie is documented right there in their own entries. Men laid low for days, The captains themselves not spared, the whole outfit slowed at the worst possible stretch of the journey, by a route that was supposed to be their salvation. That's not me telling you a story I heard secondhand around somebody else's fire. That's the men who lived it, writing it down in their own hand while it was happening to them, weak as they were, because they understood even then that what almost broke them was worth remembering plain. I won't leave you with the impression that this route is some perfect answer to a hard winter. It isn't. Camas is nearly pure carbohydrate, no fat in it worth mentioning, next to no protein. A man living off camas alone, even cooked right, will feel his strength go long before his stomach ever feels empty, because the body needs fat and protein to actually rebuild itself, not just fill space. It kept people alive alongside meat and fat, not instead of it, a side dish to whatever came off a trap line or the end of a rifle, never the whole meal by itself. Anybody telling you this route alone can carry you through a real crisis is selling you something that isn't true, and the men who depended on it for real never made that mistake. They dug it because it was there, and it was reliable, not because it was enough on its own. The men who got this wrong all shared one thing, and it wasn't ignorance. They knew the route. Some of them had eaten it before, on other trips, in other seasons, with no trouble at all. What they had, standing over that prairie with empty stomachs, was certainty. Certainty that food in front of them was food they could eat right now. Certainty that the hard part was over the second they found it. Certainty that a body that's gone weeks without a real meal will somehow know how to handle a sudden flood of it. That certainty is what put them on the ground for the better part of a week. Not stupidity, not carelessness. Just men who'd earned the right to feel sure of themselves and let that feeling walk them straight into trouble. The men who got it right shared something else. And it's a quieter thing, harder to notice from the outside. They didn't know more most of the time. They just watched longer before they acted. Watched the pit. Watched the color change hour by hour. Watched how long the ones who dug camas before them had waited before it paid off. Patience wasn't a virtue to those men, not some noble trait they were proud of. It was a survival skill, plain and practical, same as knowing which route to dig in the first place and which one to leave alone. Here's how you carry all of this. Dig camas only while it's flowering, blue bloom, so you know exactly what you're pulling, and leave the white flowered look-alike alone entirely unless you've done the homework separately. Never eat it raw, and never eat it after a quick fire roast, no matter what some 10-minute video told you was good enough. Pit roast it slow, a full day at minimum, longer if you can manage it, until it's dark and soft and sweet clean through, and check the center, not just the outside, before you trust it's done. Don't trust a shortcut just because it's the one that got the most views, and don't let hunger talk you out of the time it takes to do this right. Pair it with fat and meat. Never lean on it alone to carry you through anything real. And remember, it was patience, not luck, that separated the men who used this route right from the men who nearly died proving they didn't. Tell me something in the comments. What's a piece of hard-won knowledge somebody older than you passed down? Something you never saw written in a book anywhere, just handed to you by somebody who lived it? I read every one of these, and I mean that. That kind of knowledge doesn't survive anywhere else. Nobody writes it down until somebody like me comes along and asks. There's more of this out there than most people ever get told. Roots and mistakes and hard-earned fixes. The kind of thing that only gets passed down if somebody bothers to write it down or say it out loud. That's the whole reason this channel exists. If you want the next one when it lands, subscribe and it'll find you. Keep your fire small, and I'll see you down the trail.